dying of so much of the love about this planet. So we need the wisdom that comes without words, the inspiration, the kind of answers that come with not through books and not through our project minds of how to fix everything, but by being still and experiences our life fully in its present moment in the dimensions physical, emotional, and mental. And how can we join that? How can we evoke the messages that the Mother Earth is sending us? How can we get beyond our minds, into our hearts, into our deepest feelings, and come from a point of gratitude, humility, and love? That's what I see, inner dimension.
John? Well, I noticed that everybody in front of me is probably from the West. I also notice that practically all of the technological sins of the present century are from the West. Now, there has to be a connection between those two things. The anti-ecological moment was Western created. Out of what? Why? We have to understand that from the 6th century on, the West had a great spiritual program. And everybody from the 6th century to about the 20th century, certainly the 19th, was raised in that. The monastic orders of the 6th century named it. They said that a spirituality program had 3 parts. The first part was simply to remember that God was God. Now, if the West needs anything, it's that understanding. Because someplace along the lines, we got to think that we were God. That somehow or other, our control of the earth was superior and dominating. That was never a Western principle any more than it was ever an Eastern principle. The problem is that the West has so distorted that principle that it no longer remembers it. Then it said in this program of spirituality that you have to know who you are. That every single human being going somehow involved in the development of the best self has to start with, who am I inside? And this old document from the 6th century says, take down the masks, quit playing games. You don't have to dress as if you're a Hollywood celebrity. You don't have to drive a car that makes you Elon Musk. You can be who you are able to be, and that will be enough. And then this same spirituality program says quite directly to the West, be content with less than the best. Develop a sense of enoughness. Know that if you have enough and your neighbor has enough, you are living in the presence of holiness. And finally, in the last 4 degrees of this spirituality program, developed in the words I'm using today, says, and then you will come to the point that you will deal with everyone in your life kindly. Know that God is God, you aren't. Know that you are put here to complete the work that God started. Know who you are, what your limitations are, and accept them. Just accept them. I am who I am, and I'm not a finished product. I'm growing, and I want to be the best that I can. I don't need the best of everything. I'm perfectly willing somehow to recognize that I am not the top of the food chain, no matter what anybody says. I am in growth. And finally, recognize everybody else to be who you are. Don't make fun of anybody. Be kind to everybody. Don't mock anybody. And when that's over, when you have integrated those 12 degrees of humility, you will be a satisfied, content, and happy person. That's not what we're taught in the West. Nobody in this room that I'm looking at was taught that. You were taught, first of all, to get to the top. You were taught to have the most and the best. You were taught that you were naturally superior. Now, what do we do as Westerners to get ourselves back to the point where we have even a notion that we have a need for any kind of spiritual development that is purely Western and therefore not foreign to ourselves or to our culture? We have defied the spiritual foundation of the West for 15 centuries. It'll be very difficult, not even if we give up meat, it will be very difficult for the Westerner to see that they have no right to that animal. Even if we recognize ourselves as activists for a totally spiritual moment in our own lives, it will be very difficult for us to realize that we're masked, that we're pretending even to ourselves to be more than we are, that we are somehow or other entitled. And that will bring us to the third moment, and that means that everybody who isn't Western has the same right that we do to all of the resources of the earth in their proper proportion for all of us. What's the Western answer to somebody else's needs? Even to those down the street? If they worked as hard as I worked, they could get it too. If they had gone to school and studied like I did, they could get it too. There's a sense of Western superiority and entitlement that is itself an obstacle to the ecological movement. We must start here. We must start in the West. We must ask ourselves whether or not the ads that are luring us on television are not luring our souls as much as our bodies. We must ask ourselves, what is enough? If we can start with those 12 very particular, very specific, very credible, very measurable elements in our own life, we can move far more quickly beyond this whole struggle about, well, why don't we have bigger airplanes? And why can't we have more? After all, I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. It's cold. We're the snowiest city in the United States. We are tempted every morning to turn the thermostat up to 71 instead of leaving it at 65. The West will be the last part of humanity to recognize that what we have taken for granted, we have no right to take for granted. That we must constrain ourselves spiritually so that spiritually we can finally be happy. We're an agitated people, an agitated culture, because we haven't started at the inside. Happiness lies in here. It lies with a sense of responsibility, community, enoughness, and acceptance of the rest of the world. When we get there, we'll make very good plans for ecology.
All of us here, probably, I imagine all of us here at cop24 are aware of the need for climate action, climate-oriented action. There may be a few climate deniers who came here just to see what's going on, to come to see the enemy, so to say. But I think all of us here are convinced of the need for climate action. But there's need for inner work at the same time. And the reason for that is that any type of work in the world, any type of activism is extremely difficult because we see that the world doesn't respond quickly, it doesn't respond easily. I had a friend who went into social service And after his education, his first job was helping families that were abusing children to stop the abuse. And he came to me after 6 months and he was already burnt out, terribly depressed, very, very upset, almost shaking, or he was shaking. He was so upset. He said, Swami, I see what the people need, these families who are in an abusive situation with a child. I see what they need. I tell them what they need and why they need it, but I can't get them to listen. And so the burnout rate in social services is very high because you can see the situation, you can see the cure, and yet the people don't respond oftentimes. And so with climate change, we see the need, we can see the science, we can see what's going on in the world that's going against the science, which is creating a chaotic situation and the future of devastation and immense suffering for many people. And yet we find that the world doesn't respond quickly. And so we need to do inner work as well in order to sustain the work that's necessary for climate action. One of the things that we need to do is related very closely to what Sister Joan was so beautifully expressing, and that is we need to change our understanding of who we are, understanding of what the world is, and understanding of what our place in the world is. And let me just, don't have time to go into a long discourse on all of this. I'll just take a couple of short points on each topic. One thing about myself. We are taught, as Sister Joan expressed just a moment ago, we're taught that nowadays that I'm an individual and the individual is supreme. And we're taught that society and life is basically competitive. The one who struggles harder, the one who competes harder is the one who comes out on top and the one who deserves to come out on top. But we see ourselves somehow in conflict with the world around us. We find some people who look at the world and say, I hate everybody. Everybody is just out grabbing my money. Everybody is a liar. I hate everybody. You see other people who say, I love everybody. When I see a human face, I just see so many people to love. They're looking at the same world. They're seeing the same thing. And one says, I hate everybody. They're all out to cheat me. They're all liars. They're all cheats. And the other says, I love everybody. What's the difference? It's because they've learned to see something different in the world. And that's because they perceive themselves differently. If I can learn to perceive myself in spiritual terms, where there's no competition, where I'm not in competition with people around me, then I begin to feel a freedom and a spaciousness in my life in society. How can I do that? One of the ways is, why do I think that this individual person, that I end where my skin ends? If you touch me on the leg, I realize I've been touched. Oh, that's me. If you touch this, I don't feel that I've been touched. But why should I feel that my existence stops where my skin stops? It's a very strange thing that we learn as babies. The baby doesn't know that. The baby has to learn the extent of its physical body and to distinguish its physical body from the world outside. The baby doesn't know it naturally. But now we can learn also to see that everything that I see, it's one continuous being, one continuous existence, one continuous ocean of life. And that all of it is contained in a sense within myself. Speaking as one individual, it's true of each one of us. Each of us contains the world of our own perception. And if I can see that my welfare lies in the welfare of everyone, not just in the welfare of this, but if I can tie my sense of welfare to the welfare of others, then my sense of self is expanded. And my potential for happiness is expanded because I see that the happiness of others is connected to my own happiness. And this is a reality. If you experiment with it, you'll find that it's a reality. That if you can expand your sense of self to include others, not to exclude, but to include others, you find that you have a much greater sense of satisfaction, a sense of happiness, a sense of contentment. And so it's something that's worth experimenting with because it's founded on experiential principles. So changing the way that I see myself, to see myself as including everyone and not excluding everyone. I'm not concerned with anything outside of the skin. No, that's an extremely narrow way to see life because everything within the skin depends on everything outside. So why should I exclude the outside? No, to see the world in inclusive terms. Then to see, just one example on changing my way of looking at the world. If I can see that the world also has a spiritual depth. If I see the world just in terms of matter, and I think of matter just as something dead, dull, and insentient, then I look on the world basically as a dead, dull, and sentient place. And what I do to it doesn't matter much, because it's dead. It's just dead, dull, insentient matter. But no, that's not the whole of the world. If I can learn to calm my mind, I begin to see that there's a spiritual depth to everything. And this is experiential. This is not theory. It's not dogma. It's not religious gobbledygook. This is actually experiential. We can learn by calming the mind. We naturally come to see that the world has a spiritual depth. And we begin to feel a unity with everyone. And when we feel that, then we begin to treat everything in the world with a respect. When I first went to live in India many years ago, back in 1975, I would see that when people would accidentally touch somebody in passing with their foot, then they would touch the person like this and salute them to say that I didn't mean to disrespect you by touching you with my foot. Then I saw that they would pass by a table and hit the table with their foot, and they would touch the table and go like that, saying that I didn't mean to disrespect you. Then one day I saw them passing a trash can and brushing that with their foot, and they bent down and touched the trash can and saluted it. And I thought, this is ridiculous. There's no little person inside the trash can who says, why did you kick me, you idiot? You should have been careful. You've disrespected me. No, I saw, no, it wasn't primitive. It wasn't a primitive idea at all. They were recognizing that, no, I've disrespected something in the universe. Everything deserves its place of respect. So let me show respect for everything. So I'll close with this, that just if we learn to change our idea of self and our idea of the universe, then we begin to see a spiritual depth in everything. We learn to have patience with the universe, and we learn that, that all we need to do really is to participate with the universe. That the world itself has its own immune system. Just as our body has an immune system, and when we're sick, the body fights off disease if the immune system is strong. The earth has its own immune system and will fight off disease, that we need to participate with it. And if we participate with it, we will avoid a lot of massive suffering of many people. But that's what we need to do, is to learn to participate with the world and participate with other people and with society. And then we'll all move towards the place where life and community is sustainable. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tiokasin Goes Towards. Hope you can hear me out there, because Mother Earth is crying out for you, because she misses you badly and terribly. And because we speak a neglecting language to Mother Earth, that we don't want to pay attention to those peoples who are speaking the languages of the earth. Tiokasi chatanzi wikia paha michaji oyate toka he wichakie leon kipiki ho he wastelo wakantanka namaho ambetu le any wazio plakinkelo hukuchi alomo onta ya ama blaza yo mi waka pata ha wa yang namashio wichayaka echeki onta ya ho namahopta ye. So in all the world, we forget what consciousness is, and we begin to develop a conscience, because the language we speak has a binaryism to it. And so we speak a right and wrong, black and white, good and evil. And we make judgments out of that. And this is my experience as a Lakota. So let me begin it this way, the consciousness that was given to us as Lakota people. This is not about only my people. Because when I speak of my people, it's a derivative of ownership. So I'll speak about that which I belong to, which is water, which is the rock, all those elements that make up my being here as a body. And so the first consciousness is mani. You call it water in English. Mani. And that three-letter word in English, M-N-I, means that which is related between you and I and all things. Ni means living. I is voicing. So when you say mani, you're voicing the living relationship between you and I and all things. And that's what we call, what you call, water. We say mani. And so these are the languages, the quantum physics languages that are not neglecting the earth, that are talking specifically to the motion, the emotion, the feeling, the quantum physics of those dimensions that water is in all life that there is. So we speak about those things that we still communicate with. It's easier to speak, and maybe not so easy to speak with other humans who are not being. And so we put our praise in front of us, and we follow our praise of who we are as humans. That we invented God, that we invented technology, that we invented a better way to live with the earth. Wouldn't you all know that's not true? So we have come to a place where we've derived the sustenance or whatever we've taken out of the earth and divided into places like resource. And there's only one source. We've made words possible to divide us and rationalize why we speak this way and why we have this forum. But we're not honoring the earth like we were supposed to in our original way. So when I say Lakota, it's not about my people, who I am from where I am as a Lakota person. So when I say La, I'm asking Ko is centering the origin Ota many times for the stories, the original instructions from the cosmos to be here with us, to invite Mother Earth here to sit with us in those empty chairs of the wars that happened here, that this is the root of what's going on in the United States. That's a big symptom, the biggest sore that I know of as a Native person. And I can say that because I've watched it happen since I was a little boy, to watch what we rationalize, this language that everything is spiritual, everything is religious, that there's one God. But that's the way we look at it. Because who are we in a Lakota way to say that's God? Or arrogance to say that's God. To nullify what is spirit that can't ever be captured, put into prayer, put into whatever we as humans can come up with. So when we understand the living relationship, we understand that that tree, that water, and we speak a heart language, not a mental heart language. So the language of Lakota comes from the heart because it has no concepts. If I say that I have a heart, that would be lying in Lakota. I could say chante. Chante. Chan is tree-ing. Te is living. So what you call heart is, we call a living tree-ing. And it has to do with consciousness, just as I described water to you. So chante, tree-ing, te, living. So what we say is the chan is a seed, a nasula. So all your being is a seed. You are a seed that starts from the heart. The first thing that Larry comes out as you are within your mother, the earth, is that you get planted as a seed. And that consciousness, that little seed wants to be a hydrologist, a mineralogist, a geologist, everything, anything science that we can come up with. That's what that little seed is of consciousness. And then finally it asks its mother, can I live? Oshimalaye oyate wani wa chichuelo. So the earth says yes. Because the earth knows that its consciousness of the seed is going to give life to all through mani, the consciousness of water. And so this seed takes life, comes up above, and sees another light, other life forms, and doesn't neglect any of them. Sees the clouds, the weather patterns, the feelings, night and day, the wind, the animals, all the life, because it needs every one of those. So this tree of consciousness does not neglect the relationship that it grows with. So it's always asking the earth as it grows with consciousness. Without conscience, the tree does not have conscience. Consciousness. Alive, aware, every second. And it grows to be a great tree, gives fruit or whatever, and supports life, birds' nest, everything. But the one thing that that tree does every second of its life is it watches the stars. That's consciousness. And that's what we call our heart. So there's no word for conscience in my language. There's consciousness. Everything is respect. That means to look again. So are we looking again about how we are talking about how we can save the earth? Are we looking again about how we understand God in spirit? Because the evidence states, I don't think so. Is this reality or is this relationship? Are we stuck in a reality that there's no room for Lakota thinking, feeling, and being in the Western world? That we are stuck in little reservations? Our way of speaking is too harsh to understand when it's speaking of the crying earth rise up because it's our prophecy that this time needs to be now. And if you don't get that consciousness, you forget. You have to remember, not forget and forgive, or forgive and forget. You have to forgive and remember. But take the I, me, my, or mine, and ours out of how you refer to self. Then you understand you're not the center of the universe, but that the center of the universe is everywhere. There's no such thing as authority. I have to speak this language out of the aura, or the false aura of authority of the Western mind. I have to speak it. But yet, it's harsh, even among the people that confess to understand spirit. I don't, never have. I'm still evolving along the way. And, you know, if I've really overshot my thought process, there's no explanations, there's no apologies, because Mother Earth doesn't need that. She just wants you to be aware in that consciousness. It's much different than the human evolvement or development of what conscience within consciousness is. And maybe you'll get that because I'm only talking about an energy that comes from the language of the heart. Chante washte na pe chuzapielo. Thank you.
There's one thing common to all of us seated in this room. We all grew up in a system of education which we call the modern system of education. The special feature of this modern system is that it's designed to make you an effective worker in a factory. The system itself originates in Europe during the industrial age. And during the industrial age, everything is taught in terms of industry. So if you as a child are going through some kind of education, it must be for industrial objectives, isn't it? Education itself is seen as an industry, the school is seen as a factory, and designed along industrial objectives. So notice what happens. As a child, you enter the school, you have to wear a uniform. Why? Because you want to render everybody uniform, no individuality, no uniqueness, no distinction. Because when you enter the factory as a worker, you should be one among a million with no separate individuality. You should do what you're told. So you're fit into a uniform, and then there's the school bell. When the bell rings, your class starts, the very second. And if in the middle of the sentence of the teacher, the school bell rings, the class stops instantly and you can run out, because that's the factory model. Start with a bell, end with a bell. And you have an assembly line. Class 1, test. Class 2, test. And what does the test do? It tests whether you have been sufficiently warped and fitted into the design. And if you don't fit in, you are rejected, or you are punished, or you're detained so that you pass through the same training cycle. And what's the nature of the training cycle? Cut, chop, shape, squeeze, distort, to make you what they've already designed you to be, the fit cog wheel that will fit into society, which is itself a machine. Now, this design of the educational system is meant to dehumanize, to kill creativity, to suppress individuality, so that you may be a good worker in the factory. Unfortunately, this has continued all through. In fact, it's got worse. Because in the exam system now, the whole concept seeps backwards. If at the end you need to be successful in your exam, then in the stage before you should be trained to be successful for the last exam, for which you need to be examined, for which you have to be trained before and before. It goes so bad in certain schools. At kindergarten, if you want to enter an elite school, you have to pass through an exam, for which your parents will train you to count numbers, repeat the alphabet, etc., so that you can get into a grueling training program for the next 20 years of your life and suffer dehumanization, so that one day you may get into a good job, so that you may get enough money, so that someday you will be happy. And your parents love you, so they put you through this grind. You see how perverse the whole system has become. And that's the damage they've created in the very beginning. All of us are damaged psychologically, spiritually. And these damaged pieces, half human, mostly mechanical machine pieces, are thrown into society and somehow expected to become happy. It doesn't work. And here we find the roots of the pain that you see in the whole world. When you throw out children who are suffering and in deep pain within, and you're not even conscious of the pain because you've never experienced what it's like to be free of pain. What happens when you live your life? You spread the pain. That's all you know to do. That's all you know to be. And if you are lucky, if you ever meet somebody who's truly loving, truly happy, it's such a relief to be able to let go of your pain, to feel that happiness and joy. This is the root cause of the problem we are facing today. The pain that we are living in is the pain we have imposed upon Mother Earth. And what does Mother Earth do? She suffers our abuse. She suffers our perversion in order to help us to wake up. She gives us love, even though we give her pain. Why? Because she's a mother. The first step that we need to heal, we don't need to heal the planet. We need to heal ourselves, and we cannot because we are damaged. The first step we need to take is to let her heal us. Put yourself in the embrace of Mother Earth. Let her heal you. I grew up in India, and in a culture which was so different from this modern educational system. We were taught from childhood that everything is conscious. Everything is sacred. We didn't have to use those words. That's how we saw it. So as children, if we went to a plant, our parents would say, be careful, the plant is sleeping. You don't pluck hair from somebody who's sleeping. So if you want to pluck a leaf or a flower, you do it in daytime when the plant is awake, and you ask the plant for permission. You ask the plant, may I take this flower? And the plant will give it to you. And as a child, each one of us have felt this truth, even if we were not taught this. But in our educational system, in our upbringing, this truth was suppressed. You were told, that's your imagination, that is childish, that's not real. You're living in a fairy tale world. Get into real life. And what's real life? Hard, crude, coarse, unsacred, unreal, fake, pretentious. Even today, walk into any village which has not been modernized, and it can be anywhere in the world. Look into people's eyes. And look at somebody who's gone through the modern educational system in a normal city, and look into their eyes, and you'll see a big difference. Those who have not been through that educational modern system, you look into their eyes and you can see what they think and what they feel. They're transparent. And look at someone who's been properly educated, you look into their eyes, you cannot see what they think, what they feel. You can only see the pretense that they put forward. The whole system is designed to make you deceive, to put up a pretense, to become hypocrites. So when the system breaks down, society is breaking down, what do? You put another layer of hypocrisy in the school. You put a subject called morality, ethics. Oh yeah, now we have a big problem with the ecology, so let's put ecology as a subject. And what do you teach? Be good, smile, be nice. And what do? You pretend, you do not feel. Be courageous. What if you're told since childhood, be courageous, be courageous? What do? You put up a pretense of courage. You never experience what is real courage. And that's what we're doing with ecology. What do you teach children? Trees are good for you, so you must plant more trees. Sounds good, right? But look what you're actually teaching. You know, in education, there's something called the explicit curriculum. That's what you're telling them to do. And there's an implicit curriculum which you don't realize you're actually teaching. So in the implicit curriculum, what are you teaching children? Trees are good for you, therefore you should plant them. That means if trees were not good for you, you don't need to plant them. What you're teaching them is trees have no value except in relation to what you gain from them. You're being taught that the whole universe is around your self-interest, your convenience, your profit, your benefit. It's strange. You started with a good intention to teach ecology, but what did you end up with? And why? Because you approached the whole question from that broken, distorted, dehumanized educational mindset. And we need to reverse this. Go back to what we already knew as children. We don't need to learn something new. We need to unlearn the distortion, unlearn the fakery, unlearn the deception, and become ourselves. And that means start introspecting what you already know deep within you. And deep within you, you know this is special. This moment is special. This life is special. There's something to be done. You don't know what. Doesn't matter. But you know you're special. And science can tell you all it wants, that you're just a product of brain waves and electrical signals. What do you know? No, I know I'm real. I know I'm here for a purpose. And when I do something which is aligned to that purpose, I feel deeply happy. I feel deeply fulfilled. And when I do something which is not aligned to that purpose, I somehow feel hollow, empty. Something's wrong. I feel uneasy. Start trusting that. And take small steps. When you look at the universe, one of the things which we were taught as children was to relate to everything, to everyone as conscious. So the first thing we did as we woke up from sleep, before we stepped off from the bed, we had to recite a prayer. And the prayer was addressed to Mother Earth. In Sanskrit, it said something to this effect: "You divine being, who is clothed in the oceans, for whom the mountains are the breasts of nourishment for all life, you who are the beloved of the divine, please forgive that I place my feet on you." Now, every morning as a child, if you're conscious of this relationship with Mother Earth, and as you place your feet on the earth, you're conscious that she is your mother, it is she who nourishes you. And look at the picture, you who are clothed with the oceans. It's a picture as if seen from space, the whole of the earth as one being, one whole. imagine how you begin to relate to everything on earth. You see the plants emerging from the soil, you see them as expressions of Mother Earth. The life forms which feed on the plants are her forms, her body. The mountains, the rivers are her body, her flesh, her veins through which her blood flows. And to dam a river is to block the blood flow. Now this is not merely poetic imagination, it is a direct perception of the reality of life. Now most of you in childhood have had this perception, and if you have not, when you begin to look at it this way, you will see it is obvious. Every river is a conscious being. Every plant is a conscious being. And you can actually relate to the river consciously and call to her. Just as you can relate to Mother Earth and call to her, and she can give you specific knowledge and insights. This ability to relate to that deeper reality of life was given to a few as part of their job. We call them shamans or medicine men or whatever name you give in whatever tradition it is. But there were people who saw, who looked deeply, who could see the other deeper layers of life. But each one of us can. All of us can. It's the reason why as children we believed in fairies. We believed in angels. We believed in little gnomes. Because on some level we were sensitive to them, we sensed them, we knew them. And some of you perhaps saw them with your physical eyes, and then you were taught to close and block out that perception. But we sensed them with our heart. And what's fascinating is we can validate this in so many different ways. One of the experiments today which is being demonstrated in labs is to have two different plants, three plants, one which is a control plant, and on the second plant you play rock music, on the third plant you play something beautiful. And what happens after a month? Control plant is normal, rock music plant has declined, perhaps faded or died, and the third plant has grown very well. Now replace the music by a human being. So we have two plants, one on which every day somebody comes and curses the plant, and the second plant where every day somebody goes and speaks words of love and support and encouragement. And after a month, the plant which has been cursed actually dies out. The other plant has grown to be more healthy. Now these are experiments you can attempt at home and validate. The plant responds to you. There's one experiment ongoing which I want to share with you, and I'll close with that, which is ongoing at Princeton University right now. It's called the Global Consciousness Project. You can look it up. The website is noosphere, noosphere.princeton.edu. What the experiment is doing is it has got 65 computers spread out all over the earth, which are measuring and monitoring the vibration of a single atom in a little chip on the computer. And what happens to vibration of an atom? Well, it's random. It's sending out random pulses. So you have 65 streams of random pulses coming to the central computer, and these are correlated with a very simple mathematical formula. You have a measurement of the randomness. Now, every time the randomness falls, the graph goes up, and when the randomness increases, the graph comes back. So on the average, what do you have? 65 streams of randomness, a random graph. Except, every now and then something unusual happens, the graph shoots up. And what happens? Let's say we had, for example, 10 years ago, the tsunami that took place in the Indian Ocean. Well, about 150,000 people died. The graph didn't change. But 2 hours later, the news hit the television screens and the graph shot up. When there is World Cup football happening and we're watching the graph, just as a billion people watching the live broadcast of the football, just as someone is about to shoot the football into the goal, the graph shoots up. Why? A billion minds are now in a state of conscious attunement and alignment to one thought or one emotion, and the graph shoots up. Now this is amazing. One of the most amazing incidents which we observe is on New Year's Eve. 10 seconds before midnight, what's happening everywhere on earth? People are partying, they stop partying and they do a countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7. And all these minds are attuned to a single idea until it hits midnight and boom, again chaos. Everywhere we find the graph rising during those 10 seconds before midnight and then collapsing again into randomness. And what is fascinating is with each time zone, the graph moves differently. Amazing. What you're measuring with this experiment is that human thought at a collective level, human emotions at a collective level are affecting the vibrations of physical atoms. And that's what the graph is measuring, remember. Can you guess, of the last 20 years that this experiment has been ongoing, which was the one event when the graph rose up the highest? Can you guess? Which was the one event which shocked humanity most intensely and held you in shock the longest? Guess? Yes, September 11th, the Twin Towers, the planes hitting them. The graph went up the highest in the history of this experiment of 20 years. The graph went up the highest and stayed up for 3 days and then gradually came down. Now, if you remember, for 3 days, humanity was in a state of shock. It was such an intense, vivid demonstration on television screens. Remember, it's not the suffering of people that the graph is measuring. It's the alignment of people watching the TV screen and emotionally affected to that. Okay? So 3 days it stayed up. But what is most fascinating, the graph began to go up a full 6 hours before the event. How do you explain that? And here comes the most important insight. What this shows you is, at a collective level, the human species is one being. And at a collective level, it was as if the species was bracing for a shock. You see, each one of us on an individual level can sense things before they happen. I'm feeling sort of uneasy, and then something happens, right? We have a sense of the premonition. But here at a collective level, humanity was sensing a premonitory perception of this shock which was about to come, and this was measured by the experiment. It is amazing implication for us. But I'm going to touch upon two other incidental implications which are very important for our work today. First, remember, what it's measuring is vibrations of atoms. And what it's showing you is when all of us in this room together are aligned to a single idea or a single emotion or a single purpose, all the vibrations of atoms in this room are becoming less chaotic. And that means if there's going to be an earthquake and all the atoms are vibrating less chaotically, the earthquake will not cause disturbance, will not cause destruction. But if we are chaotic and the earthquake takes place, you're not going to stop the earthquake, but the damage from the earthquake will be greater. Consider also the implications for the weather. When the atoms are vibrating in greater chaos because our thoughts are in chaos, the weather will be more extreme. When we are in alignment and attunement, the weather will be also more aligned. In India, we have an ancient saying that to know whether you have a good king that rules you, look at the seasons and the weather, whether it is temperate. If the weather is unstable, then people are unhappy and you have a bad ruler. Very interesting connection, which is demonstrated by this experiment. And one last conclusion that I'll point to, which is the one object on earth which is maximally under influence of your thoughts and emotions. Your personal thoughts and emotions. What are they influencing the most in all of this earth? Simple. Your body. That's what you carry with you wherever you go. It's the one substance which is continuously being imprinted with your thoughts and emotions. And when your thoughts are chaotic, when your emotions are disturbed, what happens to the atoms of your body? What happens to the working of the cells of your body? They become chaotic, which means ill health. When your thoughts become aligned, attuned, in harmony, your emotions, your energies, your body also, at the level of atoms, molecules, and cells and organic working becomes more aligned, more harmonious. Now this one experiment demonstrates the deep interconnection between humanity as a collective, our individual role in that, and its direct effect on physical matter and the earth. And we have not gone deeper. We can go much deeper with other aspects of the spiritual connection. But just on a very physical level, the implications are extraordinary. And the message for us is, if we can all not only set ourselves right internally, undo the damage done by this dehumanizing, despiritualizing education, realign ourselves to what we truly are within, And if all of us can come together on the basis of this deeper unity, all these problems can be set right in the most rapid, most direct way possible. Thank you.
We have about 10 more minutes, but I'll just add to what you said, Shraddha, that the importance of our collective thought. A few months ago, I was invited to a session organized by the United Nations Population Fund at the UN, to a group of people from spiritual communities, about 30 of us were invited, to see how we could bring some spiritual language to the Sustainable Development Goals. How can you infuse them with some spiritual insight, wisdom? And so right from the beginning, he said, I just want to tell you, we cannot use the word love in the UN context. And so, okay, we are kind of like cut off right there. And then we came up with other words. Can we use compassion? No. So we spent the whole day really trying to come up, and we were stuck. We couldn't. We said, well, we have to think about this some more, because if we can't bring these qualities into our work, into the global effort to deal with these problems, then what are we really talking about? We're talking about very superficial Band-Aid solutions, not deep change. And deep change is what's needed now. So how we can, I mean, the more of us who can use that word love when we talk about the earth. I mean, we're taught in the religious traditions to love your neighbor as yourself, but we should also be taught to love the earth as yourself, to love the forest as yourself, to love the rivers as yourself. And so we've got to now expand beyond our thinking just of the human community to thinking of the life community. And I think that's the challenge now for us, to begin thinking of ourselves as part of a life community, a community of life. And just as we have struggled for decades on human rights, not maybe successfully, but we have to now struggle for the rights of all life. So I think it's taking the next step in our consciousness as human beings to see that we're equal, no better than the rest of the life forms on Earth, and to take our place in that family. So we have about 5 minutes if anybody would like to raise a question or make a comment or add anything to what's been said. Would anybody here like to make a concluding comment?
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question about, you speak about language, like how do we put in, when we have to use the English colonial language, which is very much shaped after industrialization, after the modern educational system. What is your suggestion for us to communicate? Yeah, how do you suggest? This is a question for you.
Jefferson.
Very quickly, that the first word is tokahe in my language, which I can translate a little bit, is that you don't think of yourself first. Because when you think about yourself, you're actually removing yourself from the whole. So in the languages that contain I, me, my, or mine, or ours, that's exactly dividing you from the relationship. And I said before that in my language we don't have I, me, my, mine, or ours. It's about relationship. So if you're speaking a relational language, there's no need to make you the center of that. And so when I ask people, well, maybe there's a difference between the I in English, which is this other foreign language I speak, because it's foreign language in America to me. I is a noun or a subject, or it's actually a pronoun too. But in the Lakota way, you don't really refer to yourself that except as a verb. So you're one of motion. So when I speak English, I feel like I'm stagnated and my energy's not moving, going anywhere. It just gets to mental concepts and trying to know more, prove more, saying I know in theory. In theory, all it means is to show. That's all it is. And theater. And so when I'm speaking English, I realize that I have to cut the feeling away and put it into subjects, nouns, and speak to authority as if I was the authority. And I feel that's not what it is for me, because I'm related to everything, and there's no word for love in Lakota. Because if that's what you are, why use the word for free? If that's what you are, then why use the word? So that's how we would say it. But it's not an easy answer, because it's like, well, when I speak English too much, I feel like I'm drowning and I'm intoxicated because it's all about me. And so I take my time to get away from the thought process of concepts and put it back in the action of motion of all life. And I think that's easier for me to say these things, but it's harder to do for someone who's been programmed into their language all their lives. So I don't know what that answer is. Maybe there's none. Maybe that we have to experience it instead of experimenting. So
how do we decolonize that? The brain that has been intoxicated for such long time.
So another way, there's no word for colonization and decolonization in Lakota.
No.
That's a formula that you've been given, and it's confusing. You see. So, thank you. That's a good question.
What's your mother tongue?
Newari, Nepal Basa.
Okay. So one of the things you will notice is when you think in your mother tongue, when you speak in your mother tongue, you'll come across very different than when you try to do it in English. And for those of you who don't know any other language, I would recommend you just learn another language. And just the experience of switching between languages, you'll realize your whole mind undergoes a kind of a reshaping. And that would be a good start. But still the correction will be more profound by going to the level behind language. So before you speak a word, pause for a moment and become conscious of what you want to say, but hold what you want to say without words. And if you can, after a while, you'll find hold what you want to say without ideas. Before it takes the form of an idea, which then takes the form of words. You are simply aware of what you want to experience, what you want to express as an experience internally. So it takes a little while to train yourself, but you hold that poise, and very quickly you will learn to then live in a state of consciousness which is free of the language itself. And then that's when you begin to experience these things most directly. Try it out.
Yeah, I can very easily relate to what you're saying. It's just how to not be invaded. That's maybe more.
Yeah, it's a process of cultivating your thoughts, observing your thoughts, selecting and choosing.
This is a short question for a woman in this group. What do you think about the feminism, from your perspective, about the feminist movement, about the reclaiming of power of women these last years in the world, from your perspective?
Well, I like the way you phrased it, because that is the answer. The fact of the matter is, women are not looking for power. They are looking for equality. Now, it's interesting that in the male West, it's translated as power. For instance, as a Roman Catholic, what I'm told when I open the question about the ordination of women, the answer I get back from the theological clerical establishment is that women are just looking for power. It's very interesting. I said to a bishop, then obviously men are looking for power. That's the only reason they become priests. Oh no. No, 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 no. The man is called to be a priest. He has this special nature. It's the ontology of priesthood. It changes his being. How did it get to change his being? Doesn't change her being. How does it get to be that she wants power? He doesn't want power. He wants just to be able to answer the call of God. Talk about language. The theological language of the Western Church is absolutely a nightmare of language. It is a language used to divide. And how do they divide? By starting with the superior and the inferior. Males are superior. Women are inferior. After that, you can do I don't care if you're talking in verbs or nouns. It all comes out the same way. Somebody's standing there with a heel on somebody else's neck. Guess who? So until we clear up the whole notion of being, let alone the theological questions that churches love to engage in, like baptism. What happens in baptism? They'll tell you in a fine sentence that the soul, not the male soul or the female, the soul is now free to participate in the divine until they ask to participate in the divine. The question of power does not rest in the woman's issue. The woman is asking to be seen as a full human being. I'm going to repeat that because it's so seldom said. A woman wants to be considered as a full human being. And she will continue to call for that now. Because when you say a woman is knocking at the door, who's at the door? Half the human race. There's no discussion here. There is nothing philosophical about this discussion. It is about the institutionalization of slavery in the name of God. And it cannot be tolerated. One more minute, one more second, one more hour. Can't be philosophized, can't be theologized, can't be psychologized. It must be faced. And until we come to that level of humility, we'll never solve anything.
It's on already? I just have one more question for the sir here. I listened so carefully your explanation. I just wanted to know how can we balance everything that you said without like losing everything that we've been achieving as a human race, like the green evolution, you know? How can you basically keep the balance between a lot of achievement that we have lately achieved and to keep this peaceful and close relationship with the Mother Earth?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Somehow in the modern thinking, we have been made to look at technology and scientific development as somehow needing to destroy the environment. And if you try to protect the environment, you have to stop the progress of science or technology or human comfort of life. And in fact, when you go deeper into the question, you discover it's not true. It's not true. The big problem we're seeing today is technology, or industry rather, is destroying the environment because, well, that was the quickest way out of a problem. You're producing a product, you have waste. What do you do with the waste? You throw it in the ocean or bury it under the earth. Why? Because it's the quickest way to throw it out. But if you think about it, there's no reason to stop there. You can break down your waste, recycle the waste, ensure it is not poisonous before you throw it out, and that should be considered a part of the industrial cycle. For example, all of us, what's the biggest waste we are all involved in? Can you guess? It's not water, it's not food. What's the biggest waste in the whole world? Packaging. Packaging is designed to be thrown away. It's just designed to be with you until the product which it contains comes, and then you throw away the packaging. If you think about it, the packaging should be by law biodegradable, compostable, or something which is safe. By law. But right now there's nothing to tell you or compel the industries to do that. Okay? And it's very simple to do this. Every industrial product which is poisonous has been constructed by a chemical process and can be deconstructed by a chemical process to make it biodegradable and safe. It should be by law. So nothing in the current development of technology or science or human comfort requires us to be destroying the planet other than simple convenience or cost-cutting benefits to certain industrial interests. And it can all be corrected overnight. Except that the people who decide these things are paid by the industry to not make these changes. And that's why we have to step in and compel the change. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments, and thank you for listening to us and joining us. And we're very happy.
Can you announce tomorrow's program? That anyone who's
Marianne, do you want to announce tomorrow's program? And we all hope that you'll all reflect on the inner dimensions as well as the outer aspects of this climate crisis.
Yes, so tomorrow afternoon, the speakers will actually be in Krakow. If any of you are going to be in Krakow or have friends there, we have an afternoon forum at the Grand Hotel just off the main square, and everybody's welcome. It's from 2 to 5, and then we'll have a small reception after. If anybody wants more information, you can see me. I can give you a little pamphlet. But tomorrow from 2 to 5 in Krakow. Thank you. And so, yeah, we're from the Global Peace Initiative of Women, GPIW, and our website is www.gpiw.org. And you can find out more about our programs there. And the recording? We hope to, yes, put some recordings up online when we get back. Yes, yes.
Thank you.